You're all very welcome to the Camogie Association self-care series. So this is our third webinar of the series. And tonight we're going to look at periods in sport. So our presenters for tonight are Catriona O'Halloran and Ciara O'Flynn, who are both team leads for Any Time of the Month, which is a student-led social enterprise in the University of Limerick. You might also actually recognise their voices from our Tesco Player Welfare podcast series, which we ran during the summer that the girls joined us on. So Catriona and Ciara are going to look at periods tonight. They're going to look at period poverty and obstacles that players face and how we can support them with that. Just a reminder before we do start to have your mics on mute for us. We are recording tonight's webinar and it'll be uploaded onto the Camogie Association's YouTube channel. So if you want to turn your cameras off, there's no problem with that. And if you have any questions as we go, you can pop them into the chat box and we'll come to them at the end. So I'll hand over now to Catriona and Ciara and we'll get started.
Thanks, Louise. Hi, everyone. I'm Catriona and Ciara is on your screen somewhere as well. So just to introduce ourselves, during the summer, I finished my undergrad in international business from UL, and I am currently doing my master's in global challenges for sustainability in Montpellier in the south of France. So Ciara is also calling in from France.
Yeah, exactly. So we're both here from France this evening because I'm actually on my Erasmus at the moment. I'm in my third year of European Studies at the University of Limerick. So living the French life at the moment. But nevertheless, we'll talk to you about periods tonight and everything period poverty related. So yeah, very, very happy to be here this evening.
So just to give you guys an overview of what we'll be talking about, to start it, we'll be looking at period poverty and period stigma, what they are, what they mean within Ireland. Then we'll be looking at the basics of menstrual health. So what is a period? What is the menstrual cycle? We'll be looking at conditions like endometriosis and PCOS because they're actually quite prevalent in Ireland, but a lot of us don't know what they are. Then we'll also be looking at period products and eco-friendly periods, and then just kind of putting that all in the context of sport and some key takeaway messages for everyone as well at the end. So to give you a bit of an explanation, as Louise said, we are part of Any Time of the Month. So we are a student-led social enterprise. Everything we do is on a voluntary basis. So in addition to our full-time studies in college, we are fighting the good fight for period justice. And we are part of Enactus UL. So as you can see on the screen there, that's the logo. Enactus is a student-led society that supports third-level students to set up social enterprises. So within UL, we have a number of different social enterprises that tackle different issues, different social issues. So for Any Time of the Month, that would be period poverty, period stigma, and period education, or really the lack of period education in schools. So as part of Enactus, we just work and we set up these social enterprises because we see a need, and I guess that for us that's period poverty. But we actually a month ago represented Ireland at the Enactus World Cup, so we competed against 36 other countries. We took Any Time of the Month to the international stage. So we're not only talking about periods here, but we're annoying everyone with it. And so what we're doing to achieve period justice is, firstly, we have our network of friendly strangers. So it's a simple thing. As you can see, we have like our logo with the tick on it, and we have our badges and stickers of our logo that we sell on our website. And the idea behind it is that if you see our badge or sticker or logo displayed on a person or a place, you can access them for free period products. And as well, it just gets a conversation going, because anytime someone sees our logo, you know, they're like, oh, sure, that's the group always talking about period poverty. And then it kind of inspires a conversation to talk more openly about periods. And then we have our third level program. So we currently work with 21 colleges around Ireland and the UK to make sure third level students can access period products and that the stigma is removed on campus and menstrual health is being talked about. And then we operate a secondary school program as well. I'm sure many of you here can relate when I say that, you know, no matter what age you are, I don't think any of us in Ireland received a good education in schools about periods. So that's something that we are changing, and we created alongside health professionals, a comprehensive program that teaches you everything you need to know about menstrual health. And that's what some of the content we are doing here tonight as well. We pulled that from our secondary school program, and we'll be delivering that to you guys. And then lastly, we have a workplace program where we work with different companies just to remove the stigma in the workplace, because let's face it, we spend most of our lives in the workplace. We're there 5 days a week, 9 to 5, and periods are often never talked about there. So our latest venture is sport, which is where we've started with the Camogie Association, because I'm sure, as you're all familiar with, there's a number of barriers that cause young girls to drop out of sport. There's a number of different reasons behind it, but the way we see it, if we can stop periods being one of those reasons, then we'll do everything we can to achieve that. So tonight, hopefully we'll be able to give you guys some information on how we can do that. And I'm going to pass it over to Ciara now, who's going to introduce period poverty and period stigma.
So yeah, thank you, Catriona. As Catriona just mentioned there, we're working towards period justice in any time of the month, and that period justice means tackling period poverty. So I feel like period poverty is a word that's really, it's in the news these days on social media, but I think it's worth knowing what it actually is. So the definition of period poverty is the inability to afford or access period products. At any time of the month, we have done our research to show how period poverty is a real problem in Ireland, especially amongst young people. So our research has shown that 75% of college students have worn period products for longer than the recommended hours. Then 1 in 3 third level students have faced period poverty, which, and even more terrifying, 1 in 2 second level students have faced period poverty. I think the one thing that I'm going to stress this evening, and especially now when talking about period poverty, is that period poverty has no face. It has no attributes. It doesn't suit a particular person from a particular background, a particular area. It can impact everyone's life. And as you can see there, 1 in 3 third level students and 1 in 2 second level students, it's everywhere. But the thing is, we just don't talk about it. Now, you'd also notice from these statistics that these ages, third level students and second level students, are young people in sport. So it's young people in sport who are in secondary school and who are also, in third level. So that's the age where they're experiencing period poverty, but it's also the age when they're not talking about their periods, because we all know, myself and Catriona especially, when we're still young, we don't like talking about our period at that age. And that kind of perpetuates and channels period poverty. I know probably some of you are thinking, sure, how possibly could my girls on my team or my daughter or my niece, how are they in period poverty? And I suppose I'll just give you some context on it. So imagine you have a young girl in a family of 3 brothers, and mum and dad and the brothers, they don't talk about periods. It's not something that they mention. This young girl gets her period. Sure, how for the life of her can she say to mum or dad, like, oh, I've got my period, can you get me period products? Attached with the stigma, there's that whole shame of talking about it. So then you have, in many situations, and we know this from talking to young girls for a secondary school program, they don't want to talk about their period at home. Their parents don't talk about it, so they're not going to talk about it. And therefore they kind of fall into that pattern of, not having period products, and which is also just very unsafe and not, it's not healthy at all. As well, I kind of contextualize it in a third level way. Imagine, college students budget everything, absolutely everything. I can tell you that much from living in France and counting my pennies. But you kind of have to decide between a few things at the end of the week. And let's say your period comes unexpected, but you need to get a bus ticket home. What are you going to choose? It's always period products coming on the back end of everything, because we don't talk about periods and they're seen as something that is shameful or whatever. So that's just a bit of context on period poverty. Moving on to the next slide now, I'm going to talk about how much we actually spend on periods per lifetime, which is $7,000 per lifetime. Now, you menstruate for on average 10 years straight, which we will explain to you a little while later. So that 7,000 kind of encompasses, the cost of pads of tampon, which can reach 3 to 6, or pain relief. Maybe some people need it for severe pain conditions when it comes to menstrual health. Then you have, some young girls might need birth control because they might be suffering with endometriosis or PCOS. Then you have those consultation prices to, figure that out. And then you have the replacement underwear or clothes or shorts or whatever it is. So it really does add up. And we all know, anyone who menstruates, that it does add up. And I suppose the worst part of it is that there is a part, like, there's a part of society that is affected most by period poverty, and that is those who find themselves in a situation of homelessness and those who live in direct provision. I suppose the best way to paint the picture for you is that when you think of donating to homeless people or maybe doing a drop box to direct provision, the last thing you think of is period products. I know Christmas time is coming up and we're all thinking, you know, we must do something good. I know in my brother's school now they're doing the shoebox appeal, and you know, it's that time of year where we all give something, whether it's the local charity or whatnot. But if you do donate period products, you're fantastic, but it's the last thing that we think about, you know, when we think of donating something. We always think of food or blankets or clothes or whatever it is. So I suppose a takeaway from tonight is that maybe think of period products, because it's not something we think about. And myself and Catriona, through our work at any time of the month, we donate all profits of our badges and stickers. We use those to buy period products for those living in homeless shelters and in direct provision. And let me tell you this, talking to women who find themselves in homeless shelters will break your heart, because when they see us coming with the period products, they've got such emotion in their face and tears in their eyes, because it's just nobody thinks about it, because again, nobody talks about it. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Maybe this Christmas you can drop off a box of tampons or two to a direct provision centre or homeless shelter. So now I'm going to move on to talk about the period stigma. As you can see here, there's a few words on the screen that you're all probably familiar with. So what is the period stigma? So the period stigma now is essentially using any other word under the sun other than the word period. I know from being in an all-girls school, we have an array of words. You can see some of them here now: and, flow, lady week, Tom. My personal favourite, Arsenal are playing at home. There's just an array of them, and I'm sure if I asked you in the chat now, you'd have 20 more to put in. But I suppose they are funny and they do have a giggle out of everyone, but they are euphemisms, and we are using them to avoid the topic of periods and to avoid talking about it. So that kind of behaviour of just, you know, using different words, that's perpetuating the period stigma. As well, I suppose on a more harsh side, the period stigma comes with the shame and kind of embarrassment that comes with periods. As I just briefly mentioned, I went to an all-girls school and I absolutely loved it. I mean, I could be on the whole call now talking about my experience at secondary school, but even at the age of 17, you know, young girls in 60 are preparing for our lives, choosing our college courses, some of us moving halfway across the country. The one thing that we couldn't talk about was what we all had in common, and that was our period each month. And I think it's almost heartbreaking in itself, because it's, you know, this culture is created to not talk about it because it's shameful and how dare you. And, you know, there was a lot of girls suffering in my year, and, you know, we all have found our moments where because we can't talk about it, we suffer in silence. So I suppose what we can do to eradicate the period stigma is just have those little conversations. Now, I'm not expecting anyone here to sit down at the dinner table tomorrow night and go, how's everyone's day? Anyway, I'm on my period. That's not, you know, we're not asking people to talk about their period all the time and to be, you know, going down people's throat, because some people do view it as a private issue. But there's a difference between having it a private issue and not being able to talk about it at all because it's not accepted. So maybe if you have a sister, if you're a coach here tonight, just say, I hope everyone's feeling okay. There's a box of period products in the change room if anyone needs them. Just those little things, you know, if you want to say to your friend, oh, I'm on my period, just say the word, you know, eradicate that stigma. So yeah, moving on to Catriona now to talk about menstruation.
Perfect, thanks, Ciara. So as Ciara mentioned, a lot of people don't know the fact that for anyone who gets a period, it is 10 years straight that you're menstruating. So it's on average 450 periods in a lifetime, and that is 3,500 days of straight bleeding if you put it into that context. So we spend a lot of our time menstruating, yet it's still something that is such a taboo subject, or it's something that a lot of us aren't properly educated on. So that's why we are just going to go through the basics of what a period is and what the menstrual cycle is, just so everyone's on the same knowledge level. So a period is the discharge of blood and tissue from the lining of uterus through the vagina. The tissue is what lines the uterus to support pregnancy. When pregnancy does not occur, the uterus sheds the lining. So that's what we know as a period, but the period is in fact part of the menstrual cycle. There is a bigger, greater cycle at play there. It's not just the period. There's a lot more to it. So it's on average a 28-day cycle, but that is the average. It varies for each person. It can be longer or shorter. So then when do periods begin or end? Periods are part of the menstrual cycle, which begins at puberty and it ends at menopause. And it begins at puberty with also other physical development changes for a young person. And on average, periods begin between the ages of 10 to 15. But of course, this can be younger, this can be older, it can be as young as 8, or it can be a bit older. It just depends on your genetics, your weight, your height. So I guess that kind of gives you an idea of the age groups of younger teams that are playing as to what kind of age groups would be starting to get their period. And then menopause is when ovulation and menstruation ceases to occur, which is normally in the 40s or 50s. So I'm going to play a short video now that we have it from our secondary school program, and it just kind of explains menstruation and everything within it for the hormones, estrogen and progesterone in a kind of more manageable level to take in, because if I was like shouting hormones at you right now, I think we'd all get a bit bored of it. So hopefully this video condenses it down into a nicer manner.
Day 1 to 5 of your menstrual cycle. Day 1 signals the first day of the period. The period is blood and tissue being shed from the lining of the uterus out through the vagina. This may last for up to 7 days. In this phase of the cycle, the estrogen and progesterone hormones are low, which prompts premenstrual syndrome to kick in. Another important occurrence in this phase is the development of eggs within the ovaries. These eggs are fluid-filled pockets known as follicles. In days 5 through 7, the follicle is growing larger, which has a knock-on effect on the increasing levels of the estrogen hormone. There is now only one follicle, as the rest have been absorbed back into the ovaries. Then, around day 8, the bleeding from the period should have stopped. The higher levels of estrogen and the stopping of the period results in the follicle making the lining of the uterus grow and become thicker. The uterus becomes richly lined with blood and nutrients to cater for the embryo of pregnancy. In this phase of the cycle, the hormone estrogen is increased, and this hormone helps boost brain endorphins. Endorphins are feel-good chemicals. We feel them often when we engage in physical activity or are feeling happy. This boost in the estrogen hormone allows people in this phase of the cycle to be more energised, calm and content. In the days 8 to 13 of the cycle, the estrogen hormone reaches its peak level, which then results in a rise of the LH hormone, which causes the follicle to burst and release an egg from the ovary. This release of an egg from the ovary is called ovulation and occurs in day 14. It is on day 14 that pregnancy is most likely to occur within the body if a person engages in sex. However, 3 days before ovulation also increases the likelihood of pregnancy because the sperm are already in place waiting for the release of an egg. Sperm can live in the body for up to 5 days and an egg can exist between 12 and 24 hours. In regards to hormones, it is in the days before ovulation, so days 8 to 13, that your estrogen levels are at their highest, so the body will feel fantastic. Emotions of joy, relaxation and energy will be actively present. It is in the time frame of day 15 to 24 that the egg moves from the ovary to the uterus. This movement of the egg is facilitated by the fallopian tubes. The follicle that once contained the egg produces the progesterone hormone, which has the effect of creating an even thicker lining of the uterus. Once the egg travels, it may join with the sperm if sperm is present. The joining of sperm and egg in the fallopian tube is known as fertilization. After successful fertilization occurs, the sperm and the egg will continue on down to the womb. The attachment of this egg to the womb prompts pregnancy to occur. From days 24 to 28, if the egg fails to become fertilised, then it ultimately just breaks apart. Following on from the breakup of the egg, the progesterone and estrogen hormone levels plummet. This rapid decrease in hormones when the body realises that pregnancy has not occurred prompts PMS to kick in. This phase of the menstrual cycle can often be referred to as the PMS week, as it's the week before menstruation and the hormones are low and can cause irritability, sadness and a lack of energy. Then, the cycle begins again at day 1 when the egg is released out of the body along with the lining of the uterus, otherwise known as menstruation.
Yeah, that was our video on menstruation. We use it for our secondary school workshops, and it's always helpful because we have found that we've spoke to teachers and trained them on how to deliver this, and they've had that moment of, oh, I didn't know that. So no matter what age you are, it's always helpful to know that, and especially as a coach or a parent or whatnot. So I suppose now we're moving on to period products. You can't have a period without period products. They come hand in hand. So I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit about the different ones. Now, as you can see, I only have 4 here on screen. That's not all the period products, but I'm just going to talk to you about these ones because they're probably most useful and most relevant to those young players playing sport. So the first one I'm going to talk about here now is tampons. Now, tampons are a universal product. We all know them. And for a lot of young athletes, they're the perfect thing when they're playing sport. You know, they feel secure. They don't have to worry about leaks and underwear lines and, you know, all these little things that worry you as a young woman when you're playing sport, and especially when you're in that early teens. So for tampons, a lot of people find them useful. But on the other side, there's women and there's young girls that I know that would never, ever, ever touch a tampon. And the thought of a tampon terrifies them. So it's really just about using what suits you, especially when you're playing sport. Now, I have here on the screen, as you can see, I have 4 little words here for 4 more info. So you can click these, and we have infographics as part of any time in month secondary school program, and it shows you how to insert each period product, how to dispose of it, you know, where can you buy them, what kind of options you can get, so environmentally friendly ones, things like that. So if you want some more information on whether it's tampons or pads, feel free to click those. I would also encourage that if you are a trainer here tonight, a coach, or even just a player, that maybe printing off these infographics and sticking them up in the changing room bathrooms, or, you know, anywhere in the club, so that if people need to see them, they can, because they're nice to see in private when it's just you in the bathroom and you're panicking. So that would be just something I would encourage. So as well with pads, they are a universal product and we all know what they are. Now as well, same with tampons, some people think they're ideal and they will always use them. But as well, some people will say, no, I'm not using a pad, it's like a nappy. Now that kind of is that whole stigmatized, you know, periods are dirty and that kind of a thing. So that is stigma more than anything, that kind of reluctance to use pads. But nevertheless, if they're not for you, they're not for you. As well, I have here Menstrual Cup. Now, when you think of Menstrual Cup, you kind of have this idea of like hippy dippy, like vegan, like, you know, save the world people who use menstrual cups. But you know what? Yeah, that's what they probably started out as, but they are paving their way to becoming more used in everyday life. And they are used a lot by athletes. A lot of professional athletes use menstrual cups because, you know, they don't have the fear of it falling out, and they know they're not going to have any leaks and it's comfortable or whatnot. So if you do want some more info on that, feel free to click. As well, the best thing about menstrual cups is that they're environmentally friendly, and we all know that we do have to be making a bit of an effort to make sure that we are being kind to the planet. So that's menstrual cups. And as well, I have here period underwear. These are also quite a novelty, you know, a new phenomenon. And some of us are like, oh God, no, I could never wear them. But they are coming into the markets. They're in pennies now. I know Duns are going to be releasing them soon. So they're becoming more common. And I think as well for young girls playing sport, they could be absolutely ideal. Some young people that we've talked to always say that, you know, they wear their bicycle shorts under their white GA shorts because God forbid they might, you know, leak, and it's just having that fear. So, you know, if you have boxer style period underwear and maybe you know that you're not going to leak and that you feel safe. So for young players, this could be essential and a really good tool for them. So moving on now to how we can be a bit more environmentally friendly when it comes to our period products. I think I'm going to fit the mold for a young person here right now, harping on about the environment and how we have to save it. But it is true, and we do have to save and do our bit to make sure our waste is not, you know, filled with plastic and all these things. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody uses a menstrual cup and that, you know, we all have to switch to period underwear and reusable pads, because for a lot of people, myself included, it's not realistic, or it's just not something that we can see ourselves doing just yet. So what I would encourage everyone to do is just to maybe use some bamboo pads, or, you know, pads that are made from 100% cotton, so, you know, there's no toxins in it, which is also really good for your health. because as you can see here, pads can contain up to 90% plastics, tampons around 6% plastic. A pack of pads is 5 plastic bags. One person uses 5 to 15,000 period products. So can you just picture in your head, I know that's a lot of statistics, but you can picture that there is a lot of waste coming from period products. And funnily enough, 1/5 of the waste found on Europe's beaches is period products because they're not disposed of properly or because their plastic can't be broken down. So I would just encourage everyone to make their little footprint and to just make sure everything is good. On the next slide here, I have some examples of the plastic in period products. So again, the packaging, which is used for discretion, because, you know, God forbid you have to have a period product lying around, you have to have it hidden. And that kind of is channeled as well by the whole period stigma. So I know that there is a lot of period products now that have kind of, it's almost like felt to open the period products, and it's not plastic and things like that. As well, you have adhesive rings on pads, which are full of plastic. I know if you could just picture it now, you can almost feel it. As well, the polyester fibers in pads can't be broken down, so they stay alive for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's the same with tampon strings and applicator. So again, like I was saying, it's just a matter of maybe switching to bamboo or cardboard applicators or reusable things. I just saw a question there about bamboo products being more expensive. Bamboo products are actually not more expensive I think there's a lot of bamboo products that are the same price range as Always, or, you know, these mainstream brands, or even less, to be honest. I think we all have this notion that to be environmentally friendly with our period products, we have to be spending a load of money, but they're not too expensive. So on to the next slide now, which is premenstrual syndrome with Catriona.
Yeah, so as you guys all probably heard in the first video, PMS was mentioned, and I think when we all think of periods and, you know, the symptoms that come with it, it's, you know, cramps, cravings, headaches, that is all PMS. So I'm just going to play a quick video that is less than a minute that will just give you kind of an overview of what PMS is before we move on.
PMS, Pre-Menstrual Syndrome. PMS is a combination of physical and emotional symptoms that people experience in the days before their period. PMS is prompted by the turbulent and rapid decrease in the estrogen and progesterone hormones. These hormones support pregnancy, so effectively, PMS is the body's reaction to not becoming pregnant. There is many symptoms that indicate PMS. There is emotional symptoms and physical symptoms. Some emotional symptoms of PMS can include irritability, tiredness, disruption to sleeping pattern, appetite change, anxiety, depression, mood swings, and stress. Some physical symptoms of PMS can include swollen or tender breasts, constipation or diarrhea, bloating, cramping, headaches, and a low tolerance for noise or light.
Okay, so that was our description of PMS, and I guess why we are explaining this is because, as I mentioned, it's not just the period, there's a whole cycle behind it. And I think it's important to understand what's happening in a young person's body or our bodies when we're menstruating, because that way then as a coach allows you to kind of understand what your players are experiencing as well. So from the first video, we heard a lot about estrogen and progesterone. So this graph just kind of visualizes it all to make it a bit easier to kind of see what's happening. So as you can see from the first phase, which is the menstrual phase, estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest. So that's when you have your period. And then phase 2 is the follicular phase, and estrogen is rising, but progesterone is still low. And then in phase 3, we have ovulation, and that's when estrogen dips again. And then both hormones are rising in phase 4, where they plummet again. So as you can see, hormones are fluctuating all the time. They're all over the place, and that can have different effects on different people who are menstruating. So yeah, I guess it's just to keep in mind that players can be affected differently by the menstrual cycle, and that there is a lot going on within our own bodies. So if we are to put that in the context of sport a little bit, as we saw with the menstrual phase for phase 1, estrogen and progesterone are low. So that's this one where you have your period, and that's where you can have menstrual symptoms, which can be cramping, it can be headaches. It depends on the person. And as we know, I think some people don't like to exercise at all throughout their period. It depends on the person. But exercise is encouraged because exercise is anti-inflammatory and an antioxidant, which actually makes you feel better from your period. But I think some people will never be convinced to do that. I know Ciara's laughing there, she's one of them. But it is good, and that's why it's important to still encourage players to be active on their period. And even if it's not like training as intensely as normal, like any light or moderate exercise can be good. And as well, in terms of like basic diet, if we're looking, oh sorry, I just dropped something. If we're looking at basic diet, any kind of fruit and veg that are anti-inflammatory as well can actually help you with menstrual symptoms. And of course, if you're bleeding, it's important to make sure you're getting enough iron as well in your diet. So then in phase 2, the follicular phase, I'm just going to move back and forth so we can all kind of visualize what's happening in the body. Estrogen is going up and progesterone is also slightly going up. So here the energy levels are rising with that, which mean you might be feeling better, you can do more exercise. But again, if you're increasing your energy, then you might want to increase your kind of fuel intake in your diet as well with that. In phase 3, we have ovulation. That's where we have the one big plummet in estrogen, and then it starts to rise again with progesterone. And because of this, your energy levels, depending on the person, they may dip again with it. So as I said, everything is fluctuating up and down, so there's a lot going on within the body. And during ovulation, some women get symptoms from this. There can be cramping, depends on the person. But then again, you can also kind of start eating anti-inflammatory foods like fruit and veg. It's just kind of about eating, you know, food that makes you feel good and energizing your body, because then you're preparing for phase 4, which is where we welcome PMS again. So that's about a week before your period begins. So estrogen and progesterone are declining, and PMS is all the lovely symptoms we talked about, like cramps, headaches, nausea, etc. During this phase, as it's the same with the period, exercise is good to reduce the symptoms. And during this, you can also have disruption to your sleep, or you can have an increased appetite. So it varies for each person, but that's just to kind of give you an overview of what's kind of happening in the body, that, you know, energy levels may decrease or increase throughout the whole cycle, or it's important to know that. And as well, just to say that there is research still ongoing with all of this to see how your diet might affect, because I know professional athletes are trying to get more in depth into what exactly they need to be eating in their diet when throughout the cycle, but research is still trying to back that up and to see at different parts of the cycle what kind of training you can be doing. But that's just kind of a basic overview to give you an idea of when energy levels are higher or lower. And then a recommendation that I have for an app is called Fitter Woman. So within this app, you can go in and you can like log your cycle, your menstrual cycle, and as you can see, they have 4 phases, and it tells you throughout the different phases. That's the 4 phases we were talking about here. So whether it's menstruation or ovulation, it tells you what kind of training is optimal for that period. So maybe you need more rest time during a certain phase, what kind of foods are good, or just like the physiological aspects of what's happening inside your body. And they give you recipe ideas as well. So that's one app that I think can be really beneficial to young players as well. So yeah, that's just one recommendation from us. And that kind of leads me to our next point of encouraging players to track their periods. So I think even for everyone here as well, if you aren't doing so, I highly recommend, because it can help you to understand your cycle length. As we said, 28 days is the average, but it's not, then that might not be 28 days for everyone. Yours might be shorter or longer. So it's good to understand what your cycle length is. It also allows you to identify irregularities and patterns. So as you can see there, I have some ways listed that you can track your period. So you can use apps like Fitter Woman or Clue, Flow, Maya. If you search it in the App Store, there are an endless amount of them. You can also just use a calendar to track it, or else you can even journal and write down kind of some of your symptoms. And that's something you can do in the apps as well, to track what are your normal PMS symptoms, because it really helps in sport if you know what to expect, because as we saw, PMS starts a week before your period, and then you get your period and you might not be feeling so well during that phase as well. So it's just kind of good to know for when you can expect your period and when you know your energy levels might be dipping, because there's nothing worse if you're after playing a match and you think you're after doing really bad on the pitch and you're kicking yourself up afterwards. You're just like, oh, I just don't know what was wrong. When in fact, it could just be your body being exhausted or low on energy from your period, or like your period's coming in a week and it's PMS kicking in, you know, that's why it's important to understand what's happening in your own body, and that there are a lot of other factors at play that you don't even realize. And as well, it lets you know when you're fertile, and it's a direct indicator of your overall health, because things like stress, they can delay your period. So it's just kind of understanding your own body, and this is a fantastic way of doing so.
So yeah, now we're going to go on, I suppose, to talk about some period health issues. Before I get into any of these slides now, I just want to disclaim again what Catriona said at the start. We are not health professionals. All the work that we've done in providing this information has been alongside nurses and gynecologists and GPs, but by no means are myself and Catriona health professionals. So if you feel like you have any questions, I would strongly advise, you know, to talk to a doctor, to talk to someone who works in the health profession. I also have attached at each the bottom of the slides, which you guys will get, some more info that's on the HSE websites and proper, you know, health websites, just in case any of the symptoms are resonating with you, or you think, you know, your daughter could be suffering or whatever it may be. So I'll kick it off with endometriosis. And endometriosis is a condition where cells similar to those found in the lining of the womb grow outside the womb in the ovaries or fallopian tubes. The symptoms of endometriosis are painful periods, pelvic pain, pain with bowel movements, and difficulty getting pregnant. The numbers for endometriosis are also something that is like terrifying to me. Not terrifying, but I suppose it's just scary when I realized first how prevalent it is, but how little we know as, you know, people who menstruate, or just people in general, about it. So 10% of women worldwide suffer with endometriosis, and in Ireland it's 1 in 10 women. So if you think of, you know, a camogie team, that's at least 1 to 2 young girls who will go through endometriosis, or who are going through endometriosis at some point in their life. So it's really important, I think, that we just know, and that we teach our daughters, and as coaches make sure, you know, that they have access to information like this. You know, it's really, really important to make sure everybody's in the know about their health. Another thing that I will stress is that severe period pain is not normal, and it's something that we've normalized as a society, because, you know, it's that whole periods, don't talk about it, dismiss it. But I cannot stress how much it is not normal. I've known girls throughout my life, I know I've only lived 20 years now, but I've known girls who have been suffering so much period pain, and it's countless doctor's visits, and it's just, oh, you're being dramatic, to then getting to the maybe 21, 22 and being told, oh, you've endometriosis, when they could have been told that at its earlier stage, which would have caused less, you know, painful symptoms and things like that. As well, because of this, we have also attached a symptom tracker, just in case any of these symptoms are resonating with you, or you just kind of want to get to know your menstrual cycle and things like that. So that is endometriosis. There is also another condition called Polycystic Ovary Syndrome, or more commonly known as PCOS. And this is a condition in which the ovaries produce an abnormal amount of androgens. As a cause of this, then there is numerous small cysts formed in the ovaries. So PCOS, again, is so common, but like endometriosis, nothing is known about it. And the symptoms of it are missed periods and irregular periods, excess body hair, weight gain, acne or oily skin, infertility, and then dark skin patches on the back of the neck, in armpits, or under the breast. Now, it's so hard to diagnose PCOS because, to be honest, some of these symptoms just look like puberty, and, you know, that's what happens when you're growing up. You gain your weight and you have your acne, and, you know, you've grown a bit more hair here and there. So it's a really hard one to diagnose, but nevertheless, you should kind of, like we said, track your period. Like Catriona said, it's so important for your overall health, track your period. And if you are having severely, you know, irregular periods, and you find that, you know, the excess body hair is too much, just maybe go to the doctor and check it out, because like I have here on screen, 1 in 5 women in Ireland. So that's what, 2 to 3 girls on a camogie team. You know, so like I said, with endometriosis, it's just so important to talk about these things, because you don't know around you who's suffering with it or who's in the dark about it. So that is PCOS. As well, I have amenorrhea. I struggle to say this word all the time, so hopefully I didn't butcher that one. But this is the lack of a menstrual period, and it can be very, very common with athletes where the menstrual period either stops entirely or is so slow that there is no more than 2 periods in 1 year. So it's really, really common with athletes, and the symptoms can be hair loss, headaches, vision changes, excess facial hair, pelvic pain, and acne, and of course, the absence of periods. Now, by no means is it caused by exercise, but rather an imbalance of your calories, because there's insufficient calories to kind of fuel the body. So when the energy is very low, the body starts prioritizing the process, deciding which organs it's going to use first and receive the calories. And like life, the reproductive system is the first one to be compromised. So as I said, it's very, very common amongst athletes because the lack of awareness about the condition means that athletes and coaches can, dismiss as a normal thing. And, it's just, oh, that's what happens when you play sport. But if you are having these symptoms and if you think, oh God, something's not right, just say it, get it checked out. And as well, in terms of athletes and what they can do and coaches, I think we can just all make sure that we're giving ourselves the right nutrients and that we're having rest days. I think that's something that I would encourage coaches to take away, is to kind of form that relationship with your camogie team and just make sure that you don't have 14-year-old girls turning up saying, oh, I'm so tired because they haven't eaten or they're not eating right. I know that is a whole other conversation now in terms of body issue and things like that and right food, but just encourage good nutrition, and that rest days are really important because there is no point in overworking your body because, you're just causing yourself more pain. And like I said, for more information, you can check out that link below and it'll bring you to the HSC website. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ciara. So we are just going to give you all some kind of key takeaway messages. So first of all, what can we do to tackle period poverty and period stigma? Our first suggestion is to provide period products in your club, whether that's in the changing rooms or the first aid kit. As Ciara kind of introduced us at the start of period poverty, it is a lot more prevalent than we'd expect for a number of different reasons, whether periods just aren't talked about at home. So we actually have had a lot of people from our social media when we do the answer boxes on Instagram. I'm sure you're all familiar with them, but when we asked for like first period stories, a lot of people said they actually hid their period for a long time at first because they were too embarrassed to talk about it. So you never know, there might be young players who are doing the same thing because they're too embarrassed to do it and they can't actually access period products. So it's just to be able to provide them in somewhere as well where a player doesn't have to ask for period products is also something fantastic, because at that age, as Ciara said, I think once you hit maybe 16 or 17, you become a bit more comfortable talking about it with your friends, but then you might not want to talk about your period with anyone else. So for a young person to have to go up and ask a coach or a first aid person for a period product, that would probably put them off. So just to tell them, like, if you are providing them, that they're there in the first aid kit, if you ever need anything, just take what you need. And that's why our second point as well is to provide a mix of period products. For example, like have some pads and some tampons, because everyone has their own preference. And just having period products there would be such a relief of anxiety for a young player, because that might even put them off going training the week of their period if they don't actually have any period products and they're like, oh well, I'm afraid to go training because I don't want to leak. Or if you show up to a game and you suddenly get your period, I think we've all been there, where you don't expect it and then it just comes out of nowhere and you're unprepared and you're about to go on and play a match, and then that's just constantly what you're thinking of throughout the game rather than being able to concentrate and enjoy it. So it's simple things like that that can actually really help players by providing period products. Another thing that we said that our own team members have come across is the lack of bins in clubhouses sometimes. So I know I've always joked about this, but when I played football in camogie when we were younger, you'd often go to a pitch, like if you were traveling for a match and there wouldn't even be a bathroom, never mind a bin in the toilet. But it can often be, hard for a young person if they're changing their pad or tampon before a game and then there's nowhere to dispose of it. So that's something as well, like in your own clubhouses, just to make sure that in the girls' bathroom that there is something. And then as well, to kind of remove the stigma, as Ciara said, maybe we can stop using euphemisms. It's so easy for us all to say, oh, like it's Aunt Flo this week, or she's visiting, just to avoid saying it. But it is so important just to say the word period, because it kind of opens up the conversation as well, that it's absolutely okay to talk about periods, and we should, because our menstrual health is so important. And it's so important for young people to know that it's a normal conversation, and that if they need help with their menstrual health, or if they need help accessing period products, that they can openly ask someone. So it's just things like that that can help remove the stigma. And then as well, what can we do to support female sports players? Another one that I think everyone has heard of is change the color of shorts. I know a lot of teams are now moving away from white shorts that they train with or that they play matches with. I know for the sports in Camogie, it might not be as applicable, but still, if the training shorts are white, it just causes extra anxiety for players. Like, I know from myself from being there, here it was the same. You'd always wear the undershorts. You probably always see the girls wearing them, like the navy or black undershorts under the white ones, just to make sure that nothing leaks. Because God forbid, like, it would just be mortifying. We all know that. So it just would remove some anxiety if the colors can be changed, or even just say it to your team, like, is this something you're interested in? It's a simple thing that can put their minds at ease. Another thing is to create an open environment where athletes can actually talk to you. We know that these conversations around periods might not be so easy at first, because we normally don't have them. And we're saying, here tonight, you guys are all making the efforts to educate yourself on the basics of menstrual health. And we're not saying that you need to go out there and reiterate everything to your players, because you're not health professionals. You're not there to do that. You're not there to advise them on endometriosis or anything. But it's just important that you know yourself what is happening as they are going through these changes, because puberty for young people is so confusing. There are so many changes happening to your body, and especially when you get your period. We saw all the symptoms with PMS. A young person might get all of them in one go and get really bad cramps and really heavy periods. Another person might not feel anything, but as they get older, they're going to start having the symptoms of PMS. Everyone's body is so different. So that's why it's just that if you know kind of the basics of what's going on, and you're able to have a conversation to say to them, look, if you ever need to talk to me about it, or if you're not feeling well at training, you can just tell me that. Or if you don't feel like going full out at training today, that's no problem, just tell me. It's just creating that environment where if they need help, they can talk to you, and then you can direct them to where they need to go. And then other things we can do is encourage players to track their period. This is something that's really important, because it can really help you. When you kind of understand your cycle, you know what to expect, you know when your hormones are changing, when your energy levels are dipping. So it's just really important as well, and a good overall health indicator. Another thing you can do is share resources with your team. So as we mentioned a few apps for tracking your period, if you want to send them a few of those, or the Fitter Woman app that we mentioned. Similarly, any time of the month on our website, we have information on our social media. We do a series called Menstrual Monday. So every Monday we take a different topic to do with the menstrual health, and we post about that in like a broken down manner so that it's easy to understand, because sometimes you can get a lot of information thrown at you about periods. So it's just taking different topics in bite-sized pieces so that young people can access that. And even I always learn something from our posts, because I never got the education in school. My parents are great to educate me, but often there's so many things that you don't think about, like blood colors, for example, or discharge. It's just things that no one really talks about that are completely normal. So we have kind of all that education as well. So it's just kind of directing them to resources where they know they can access that information. Another thing we always say is to encourage players to play sport even when on their period. It's good for you. It actually helps you. Ciara, you're making a face again, but it is good for you. It reduces your symptoms because it is a natural endorphin. So just to give them that encouragement, saying again that you have understanding that you don't have to go full out, you don't have to do all the sprints if you don't want to, but just come down and do a bit of exercise. And it's a bit like, let's face it, in camogie or anything, most of the girls go down for the chats anyway, so when they're younger. So just encourage that, because it's good for them to get out. And then what can we do for ourselves, because a lot of you here are women, as we can see. So even for yourself, if you haven't done so previously, track your own period. Menstrual health is really important. It's really good to understand your body, and that's why we also did an overview of endometriosis and PCOS and amenorrhea this evening as well, just for your own health or for your own daughter's health, just to kind of understand what is happening, and just so you're aware of that, because these issues are a lot more common than we first think. And as a parent, we said, talk about periods with your children. It's so important, and something we always say is, you know, whether you have boys or girls, like, talk about it with all of them, because we do a secondary school program where so tonight we took a snippet of like all of our different workshops to combine this here. There is a lot more we could talk about periods, but we said we'd try and condense it down a little bit for you guys. But in our secondary school program, we've created 6 different modules to cover like everything that a young person needs to know when they start menstruating and want to know about their body. So we do that with both boys and girls in schools, because, you know, I think in primary school, for me anyway, when we had like our education, basic education about periods, we were separated, boys from girls, and that only kind of fuels the stigma. And, you know, it means that, oh, well, females can only talk about periods between ourselves, and then guys are absolutely uneducated about everything. So it's just kind of important to talk about it with everyone, like all of your children. So yeah, I guess that's kind of most of our key takeaways. And yeah, that's everything from us this evening. I don't know if Ciara, you have any wrap-up message you want to add?
I think, like, I just, of course, thank you to the Camogie Association for having us here this evening, and, you know, to everyone who turned up. It's fantastic to see you here, and we're so delighted that there is people, you know, wanting to make a difference and to be more educated. I think for me, the one thing I can say is I'm a big advocate for communication and talking about things. If you can encourage maybe your child to, or even your child's school, to say, listen, will you just do this program for the first years or second years? It's really good. You know, it's not like they're not going to learn something. And in the same note, like, just talk about it. I think if we start talking about periods, they slowly become unstigmatized, and everything gets better when you talk about it. And that's a lesson to take through life, I've found. So that's me for this evening. And again, thank you so much for having us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. Before we take some questions, we just have a quick Zoom poll that we would appreciate if you guys could fill out. It's just 4 short questions. It's literally yes or no. It just helps us to kind of gauge the learning of people from our webinars. So I've launched it there, which means you should all be able to fill out those yes or no questions. Is it up? Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess if there's any questions, we could start taking those.
That was super, guys. Thanks a million. Folks, if anybody has any questions, if they want to pop them into the chat, or if you want to unmute and just ask, there's no problem. I might kick things off while we see if anybody pops something in. We did have quite a few questions coming in our pre-registration, so I'll go with a couple of those if that's okay, guys. One of the first ones was in relation to the shorts, or the color of shorts, which you did mention. So players have expressed concerns over wearing white shorts when playing. What would your advice to clubs be around this?
I suppose, like, the one thing you want, and this is my personal kind of view in it, and I'm sure Catriona will give you hers, but the one thing that I can say is, when you're a player, all you want to do is get out on that pitch and feel comfortable. And, you know, when it comes to camogie, it's just you just want to play the game, and you want to feel comfortable, and you want to be with your teammates. And if you're worried about a player white shorts, you know, you're going to be so distracted. And you're at that age when you're 14 or 15 where your period is the most embarrassing thing in the world, and God forbid anyone ever speaks to you about it. So, you know, that whole thing is so inflated of the fear of leaking and the fear of someone seeing something. And it's not even the leak, you know, some young people we've talked to fear that people are going to see their pad through their white shorts, whatever it may be. So my advice really to clubs is it's such a small little change, and it'll make your players feel more comfortable, therefore perform better. So, you know, my advice would be to just implement it and get rid of the white shorts, essentially. Catriona, I don't know if you have anything different.
Yeah, no, I would just echo what Ciara's saying. I think, you know, it's a simple thing that can be done that removes a lot of anxiety for players. So, yeah, whatever can make young girls more comfortable to keep playing sport and keep showing up to training and matches, I think it's well worth the effort.
Brilliant. That's super. We also had a couple of questions in around managing girls' training during their cycle. Probably a bit of a big one, but
yeah, I guess we did like a small overview on it with the different phases of the cycle. As you can see, energy levels change, your diet requirement changes. So I think for that, it's just to, as a coach, be aware, because I think a lot of young athletes won't want to discuss in depth with you about what's happening in their cycle. It varies. I know, like from our team, my mum was one of our coaches. I'm sure some of the girls would treat her like she was their own mother. You know, they tell her everything. So if you have that relationship and they want to tell you everything, that's perfectly fine. But I guess for you as a coach, just to kind of be aware of what's happening, and that being understanding that in different levels of the cycle, that might be a reason why someone's underperforming, and rather than pushing them constantly in training, if you can tell, you know, from your own players, like whether they're on the ball or not that day, just kind of understanding that might be a reason behind it. And I guess, yeah, if they're comfortable talking to you more about it, that can be it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Guys, if anybody that's watching wants to ask a question, feel free to jump in or to pop it into the chat, whichever you're more comfortable with. I'll go with one more, guys, before we finish up. So a couple of questions actually coming in from a male coach perspective as well this evening. So how can male coaches in particular bring up conversations if they find it difficult to discuss the topic?
Do you want to go for Catriona or will I?
You can start.
I think, like, no matter how much, and I'm just going to give you the example of myself and Catriona, no matter how much we talk about periods, there's still going to be a moment when we talk to a particular person or a particular organization, we go, oh God, like we're talking about periods. So that thing is never going to fade, and it's always going to be something that is daunting. And I can guarantee you, and I'm not a male coach, so I don't know, but I can assume that it's probably so daunting, and the thought of it is just not something you want to ever do. But I think the only way you can kind of overcome it is to talk about it. And I think the benefit of it will be much more than the fear that you feel in starting the conversation. You know, if you're a male coach and you have a panel of 15 young girls and you said, you know, girls, there's pads and there's tampons in the changing rooms. And if anyone is not feeling up to run and sprints today, let me know if you're on a period. I can tell you, if I was 14 and I heard one of my coaches say that, I'd feel so wanted and I'd feel so welcome. And I think it would just create a bond, and it would make young players so much more comfortable. And if ever there was a day when they had to approach such male coach and say, hey, I'm not really feeling okay today, can I sit this one out, or can I take it easy? You know, it's having that room to do so. So I would say the fear of having the conversation and starting it is so minuscule in terms of the benefits of having it. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I think Ciara's spot on. You know, I think we're often more scared to talk about subjects like this, and it's not going to be as bad as you think, but I can understand from a male perspective that it might be a bit daunting. But, you know, it's just, yeah, I guess 2 minutes of courage to talk about it, because once you talk about it for the first time, it gets a lot easier, because then the players are like, oh, okay, he's quite chill about periods. Like, I can mention it to him again, because if it's never mentioned, then I guess that's the kind of issue. But as Ciara said, like, you can like mention for the first time, oh, there's period products if you need them. And then, you know, like if that's as comfortable as you're doing as a male coach for the first conversation, and then maybe after that you can then mention, like, you know, if you're not feeling well on your period. But yeah, I guess the hardest part is just starting, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, you know, starting by opening the conversation as a whole, as opposed to having a specific one-to-one conversation, kind of eases the coach and the players into it, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's just kind of starting in it, even with a smaller conversation, like mentioning it once and then building on that as time goes on even.
Perfect. I think we had a question come in here. So do you suggest leaving a basket type hamper with period products in the bathroom / changing rooms?
Yeah, definitely. I think if it is possible, go for it. But I think, you know, a lot of people are often apprehensive. We see it with our third level program or a workplace program that are like, oh, if I leave period products out, they're all going to be taken. And we're like, well, if they're being taken, it means the players need them. So, you know, like if the products are being used, that's a good thing, because it means the players are actually need them, and they were going without them if they weren't there. So it definitely is, if your club can do it, to just leave a basket there where they can access period products if they need them, it would make a huge difference.
And as well, it kind of is better to have a basket there instead of, you know, some poor 14-year-old have to saunter up to her male coach being like, can I have a tampon? Like, you know, if they're in the bathroom, she doesn't have to go through that, because as I said, at that age, you're terrified. So yeah, definitely.
Brilliant, guys. I don't think there's any more questions there that have come in, so we'll leave it at that. We've literally hit the hour mark as well. So I suppose firstly to say thank you to both of you for coming on and to contributing to the series. It was an absolutely brilliant webinar, so thank you very, very much. I'm sure everybody has taken loads from it. There's loads of nice comments coming in there as well, so which is great. So thank you both very, very much. If anybody is interested as well, they can still catch the Tesco podcast, the Player Welfare podcast, which we did during the summer on SoundCloud with the Bubble podcast. And yeah, that's everything really from us, guys. For anybody watching, we are back again next Monday with a episode on alcohol and reducing cancer risk. So we'll hopefully see you all then. But for now, thanks a million, guys, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.